care specialist here at the Living Coast, and today we're really excited to showcase an animal that isn't actually on exhibit at the zoo, but one that we work with in the back, the Puerto Rican Crested Toad. So this is an SSP animal, a species survival plan. So the AZA, which we are a member of, formulates these species survival plans to help protect and conserve animals. So the Puerto Rican Crested Toad is a critically endangered toad that lives in, obviously, Puerto Rico. And it is the only native toad to Puerto Rico, although there are some invasive toads that live there. That is part of the reason that they are endangered. And they live in two places in Puerto Rico. Most of them live in the dry forests of Guanica and Quebradillas. And there's expected to be about 1,000, maybe a few more left in the wild. But what the SSP does, they organize a group of zoos and aquariums to breed these toads, and then we release the tadpoles to the wild. So since the formation of the SSP, over 500,000 tadpoles have been released into their historic range. And the Brookfield Zoo has been participating since 2016, and we've released 12,323 tadpoles since that time. And last year was our most successful year, and we released 6,024 tadpoles back to some farms that are some pools that are managed in Puerto Rico. So yeah. So we can do a feed. So here we have 5 adult toads in this aquarium here. And you can see there's 4 females and 1 male. They are sexually dimorphic, which means you can tell the males and females apart. So let's see if we can get the male out. He's being a little shy. So if you look over here, they're sexually dichromatic. So the male is the one that's sitting up front, and you can see he's a little bit more brightly colored than the females, with a little bit more of a yellow tinge. And then if you also notice, the male is about half the size of the female. So sexually dimorphic is when you can tell the male and female apart by their appearance. We can also give them a little feed. So in the wild, they're insect eaters, so we give them live insects here at the zoo. So we have some crickets for them to eat. You can see there's some powder in there. That's a vitamin and mineral powder that we will kind of dust the crickets with to make sure that the toads are getting all their vitamins.
Can these guys swim like frogs?
They're not as good a swimmer as frogs. So frogs and toads are both in the class Anura, so they're closely related. But frogs tend to have webbed feet and be a little bit better in the water. But they definitely breed in small vernal pools, temporary pools in Puerto Rico. So they can swim a little bit, and they mostly will sit along the edges of pools and call to their mates. And we actually have a recording of their call. So if you want to take a listen, I'll play Puerto Rican Crested Toad mating call. So in the wild, they'll breed during the breeding season, but here at the zoo, the SSP coordinator will sort of let us know when they would like to do the release based on when they have people to man the pools. We participated last October, and then we will also do a round of breeding again this coming October. So hopefully we can beat our record of just over 6,000 in this next round of breeding.
How many eggs can they lay at once?
They can lay many thousands of eggs. Again, the 6,000 we had was from 2 pairings, so that's roughly 3,000 per animal, but it can vary, and not every egg is going to be fertile. So.
Can they smell?
They have a limited sense of smell. Mostly they're visual predators, so they'll see something moving that they might want to eat, and they'll jump over and grab their prey item.
What are these called again? Can you remind me?
These are Puerto Rican Crested Toads. And while there's a lot of frog species in Puerto Rico, this is the only native toad species.
Are they going to react to the recording that you just played?
It seems like they didn't. I think sometimes you don't want to overdo it and play too much, especially when they've been conditioned. So they go through kind of a resting period in the wild where there's a drier period, and they don't hibernate, but they'll estivate, so they'll kind of not eat and relax for a while, and we have to mimic that here before we breed them by chilling them down. They typically are at about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and we chill them down to about 60, and we end up feeding them less, and that kind of conditions them to breed once we bring them back up to tropical summer temperatures.
So just a few minutes ago, there was a cricket on one of the toads' backs. Do they care if the crickets go on their backs?
They probably don't love it, but I think it doesn't really affect them much. Usually they'll jump right off. It's just crickets being crickets.
Why are Puerto Rican crested toads endangered?
Sure. So a large part of the problem is development. So if you kind of take over the places that they used to live and breed, it makes it harder for them to exist in the wild. They also are affected by invasive species. So they're competing now with animals like the cane toad, which is an invasive toad that's been a problem in a few different places.
How long do they live?
I think they can probably live about 10 to 20 years. They're pretty long-lived animals.
Are they usually this active?
They're a little more active now just because we just threw some crickets in. They actually sleep for a large percentage of the day, which is part of the reason that they're not the best exhibit animals. Mostly they'd just be sleeping. They're fossorial animals, which means they like to kind of dig and burrow into the rockwork and into the soil and kind of just hang out there. So they're not the best exhibit animals, but we're glad we can show them to you here on Facebook Live.
Why are they bumpy?
So a toad's warts are actually produce toxins that help protect them from predators. So if someone tried to eat them, they can release toxins, and that might help protect them depending on what animal's trying to eat them.
Somebody noticed the toe tapping. What did they do that for?
Yeah, I don't actually know, but it seems like when toads and frogs get excited, they'll do that. Particularly when you're about to feed them, they'll tap their toes. I think it might be to help distract their prey items while they jump over and grab them.
What are their predators?
I mean, any mammal that can kind of grab them would be a predator. When they're small, bigger frogs and toads might eat them, so pretty much anything that can grab them and swallow them would be a potential predator. Birds as well.
So are they poisonous?
They may be toxic if something eats them, for sure, or tries to eat them. So these are the toads that we have raised here at the zoo. These are the ones from that we raised in October of last year, that were tadpoles in October of last year. So in addition to the 6,000 that we sent out, we keep a number of them here to be part of the breeding population. So these guys will be the next generation of toads here at the zoo that we'll be raising to eventually release as well.
How big do they get?
So you saw some of the adults. The males, again, are a little bit smaller than the females, so they can be about 40-ish grams, maybe a little bit bigger. Females can be roughly 120 grams, so 3 to 5 inches or so.
What do they eat besides crickets?
So they can eat any kind of small invertebrates. We can give them mealworms, hornworms, waxworms, a variety of things. But crickets seem to be a favorite, but we can kind of mix up the diet with some of those others.
So you talked a little bit about it. What are the differences between frogs and toads?
Sure. So they're all kind of closely related. They're in the same class, but toads tend to be animals that are drier and wartier and don't live in as close an association with water. But most frogs and toads do lay eggs in water, though not all of them do. So most of them are pretty intimately connected to water and aquatic ecosystems.
How old is the oldest toad that we have?
I'd actually have to check that. I think they're probably around 10, but I'd have to double check.
So where do they live at the zoo, since they're not viewable for the public?
So they live in a separate room at the Living Coast, sort of behind the scenes. So I think people think that what they see at the zoo is all that we do, but we actually have a number of really cool projects like this Puerto Rican Crested Toad breeding project behind the scenes.
Do they have names?
We don't tend to name them just because we have a large group. So if you have suggestions, we'll take a look back and see.
Can they be trained?
Certainly any animal that is food motivated can be trained. So if there were behaviors that we thought were important for their well-being, we could train it, but they're pretty easy to handle, so we don't tend to spend too much time on training for these guys.
What do they feel like?
Sort of dry. I mean, I don't know. They're cold-blooded, so they're not warm or anything. They'll be the temperature of their environment, and they're just sort of dry, a little bit lumpy, I suppose.
Did I ask how long they can live already?
Yeah, it's probably something like 10 to 20 years. I think it's hard to tell because it's really hard to find them in the wild. They mostly just burrow and hide, and that's about all you'll see of them.
So we saw with the adults that they're sexually dimorphic. Can you tell the difference between males and females when they're this young?
Not really, although you can see some of them are growing at an uneven rate, so it might be that the larger ones are females and the ones that are growing a little more slowly are males.
What do they do for fun?
They're pretty lazy, so they do love to sleep and nap for fun, I suppose. I don't know if we call it fun, but it's what a large portion of their day is actually spent resting and sleeping and waiting for their next meal.
What are the stages from egg to toad?
Sure, so they'll start as eggs, which the female will lay several thousand, and they're in kind of long strands. And then they'll hatch into tadpoles, which the eggs hatch in 24 hours. They're a tropical toad. They're kept in warm water, and they tend to develop very quickly. So they'll hatch into tadpoles. The tadpoles will exist for just a couple of weeks before they metamorphose into small toads, which look exactly like the adults, but they're very tiny, and I guess that makes them a little cuter, I suppose. But and then they'll just continue to grow from there. And then after a few years, they'll be ready to breed themselves.
What senses do they use to hunt?
They're mostly visual predators, so they'll see the insects and invertebrates that they want to eat moving around and jump after those things.
How fast can they hop?
You're pretty much seeing it here. I don't know if we've ever clocked them, but they sort of are pretty quick moving when they see some crickets and things that they want to eat. Otherwise, they're, I don't know, they're pretty still and lazy, I suppose you'd even say.
It looks like some of them have gold eyes and some have more silver eyes.
Yeah, I don't know the difference there.
What are they doing with that movement underneath their mouths?
So that's just how they breathe. It's also, when they eventually get older, the males will call to females, so they'll breathe in air to their lungs, hold their nostrils shut, and then move air between their their pouch and their lungs, and as they move the air back and forth, they'll be able to make those calls that we heard.
How many tadpoles, or not tadpoles, but Puerto Rican toads have we released total into the wild?
I think we have sent, 12,323 total tadpoles since 2016. So we're hoping to get another 5,000 to 6,000 or so this year, but hopefully maybe even a few more. So.
Do they sleep on top of each other?
They do actually. They tend to like to congregate. I don't know if it's that they're not necessarily social, but I think they all like to be in the best spots. So we put up a couple pieces of wood here as they were in these enclosures. As they were going to go to sleep, they'd probably all congregate under there. I think they just like to be in the best spots.
Do they have sticky feet?
They do not. They're not like tree frogs, although they're semi-accomplished climbers. I know one of them was trying to make its way out of the aquarium that we have it in here. So they don't have sticky feet, and they're not really known to be climbing animals like the tree frogs, but they can climb a little bit.
Why are they so crucial to their ecosystem?
I mean, every animal is crucial to its ecosystem. The kind of dry scrub forests of Puerto Rico are unique because most of the island is fairly humid and tropical, so those ecosystems are particularly susceptible to damage, and you never want to lose any species because sometimes you don't even know the full impact that it has on its environment.
Why are they called the crested toad?
It probably has to do with the little bit of a crest that you see behind the eye, although it's not as pronounced as some other frogs that have kind of very dramatic crests.
How many total are at the zoo?
We have 26 adults and then the 8 juveniles that you see climbing on the glass in front of you. Okay. All right, well, we're wrapping this up here. Thanks again for joining us here at this Bringing the Zoo to You. Remember to join us every Monday through Friday on Facebook at 11 and Tuesday and Thursday on Instagram at 2. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll hope to see you soon.